Hey guys, it's Adam. Thanks for coming along to start this beginner's production course with me. Now, I mentioned, I think in the intro episode, that today we're going to be covering what is a DAW. Well, a DAW is a digital audio workstation, and put simply, that's just where we record music. We obviously use computers these days, but it more refers to the program. Do we use Logic Pro 10, Ableton, Fruity Loops, Reaper, Pro Tools? They're all DAWs. Now, we're going to be using Logic Pro X, Logic Pro 10. But if you're using Ableton or GarageBand, that's completely fine. The controls in this episode are going to be very specific to Logic, unfortunately, but the rest of the course, I'm just going to be using tools that you'll probably have in your DAW too, such as compressors and EQ. You'll probably have comparable sounds that we're using. It won't be exactly the same, but most of the controls will, so please stick with us. Maybe skip through this lesson if you're not using Logic, but if you are, this will be really useful for you, and then when we start the other lessons, you'll know where everything is on the screen. So let's go over to the computer and check this out. Okay, so this is my desktop. As you can see, I'm a big BoJack Horseman fan, my favourite TV show. But let's just talk through how to open Logic. Before we start, I've got this set up at the bottom of the screen so you can see whenever I use a keyboard shortcut, it'll show you at the bottom there. But first, let's just open Logic. So I've already got a session open. As soon as you open it, this is what you'll be presented with. It'll ask you whether you want to start a project with a software instrument, audio, drummer, external MIDI, guitar and bass. So for this whole course, we're not going to use any tracks other than the software instrument and audio. So for now, just go ahead and open up a software instrument. So by default, it just opens the classic electric piano. That's the default sound in Logic. And if you've got a keyboard like this one here, or you've got one like this one that I've got to my right hand side, you can just jump in and start playing that straight away. You know, it works straight out of the box. So what we're going to do is look through the different sections of the screen you can see here, just to give you an idea of what we're working with so you understand it later in the course. So let's start in the top left. The first button you see on the top left is this library button, which shortcut is Y. So you can either hit Y or you can click on this. And this is going to open all of the sounds that are built into Logic. So if you click at the bottom here where it says Vintage Electric Piano, it's going to take you back to the main menu. These are all the sounds that you get for free when you buy Logic. If you can get the free version as it's out until June or July, go for it. They'll all come included. And in each of these, there are hundreds of sounds sorted by genre. So if you click on the synthesizer button like I just did, and then go to brass, for example, and then bright synth brass, it'll load that up, and you're playing a bright synth brass sound. Very 80s. It's really, really easy in Logic to get through all these sounds, and the way I'm navigating this is down at the bottom here where it says synthesizer and brass. If you just click on those, it takes you back to the main menu. So if we went to piano and then clicked on the Yamaha Grand, down here we want to go back again, just click on piano and it takes you right back. So for now, let's just stick with this Yamaha Grand piano. We don't really need it for this lesson anyway. Let's keep working across the top. Next we have this info button here, which shows this mixing console looking thing on the left. We'll get to that in a minute. We have the help button, which you're not going to need really. It opens up all these horrible things. We don't need that. Next we have this toolbar section. This toolbar is super useful. We're going to get to this later in the course, but for now, I don't want you to worry too much about it, so just leave that one closed. These buttons here aren't all that useful. I never use these buttons. So this first one, the Smart Controls button, lets you change the controls on the instrument you're using. I wouldn't recommend using it. I just think it's easier to open the instrument usually. This button is for the mixer, which I always use X to open, by the way, mix. There you go. So you can open the mixer like that. This just shows all the tracks you have and lets you turn them up and down like an old-fashioned mixing desk. Really easy to use. But we're not going to really need that for this course, so don't worry too much about it. Just be aware that it's there. And then the next button is this scissor tool. It actually opens up the MIDI piano roll, which we're going to get to next lesson. So again, don't worry too much about that. That's on the shortcut E, which is what I usually use to open the piano roll. Right, so now we're getting to more probably obvious ones. These are your fast forward, rewind, stop, play, record, and loop buttons. The cycle or loop button is super important, but again, that comes a little bit later. So these tools just let you drag around the project as you'd expect. On the fast forward and rewind buttons, you can move your mouse to speed or slow down the scrubbing. That's fine. Play is obviously play. Stop is stop, and if you click stop again, back to the start. And as I'm sure you can probably guess, red means recording. So if you click this button or hit R, it'll start recording. and you can start playing in. But we'll get to that. Hold fire on the recording side of things. To go back to the start, just hit return or enter, or you can click this button here. Next is our sort of readout view here. So this is all the information about our project. The two really important things are the tempo and the time signature. Now, obviously the bar and beat's important. That changes as you go through the song, as you can see. But if you want to change the tempo, say you want it like a pop song, like 120, you just double click, type 120 and enter, and now the song's at 120 BPM. It really is that easy. If you want to change the time signature, just click, and then all the time signatures you could really ever want will be there. You could even customize it, but for now just leave it in 4/4. You can change the key of the song, although this doesn't have much bearing on the project. I've never really used this. It usually defaults to C major. And when it says play head position, you might have seen there, play head position, this white line is the play head, and anything the play head touches on this timeline is what's playing. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It'll make a lot more sense as we start adding clips and stuff, but just remember that this is called the play head. So next up, we've got these 4, 5, and 6 cymbals on the right-hand side. Now, you're only going to have, I think, 5 cymbals. So I want you to do something first. I want you to right-click, customize control bar, and display. Now, don't worry about any of these options, but I really need you to be turning on low latency mode. It's going to bring up this little icon up here, which you really need. So turn on low latency mode so you get the option, click OK, and that's this button here. It goes orange when it's turned on. Ignore it for now, leave it off, but that will come in handy later on when we're recording things. This button is your tuner, which we're going to look into when we get to recording guitars. Very exciting. We've got a count-in button, we don't need to use that, and a metronome button. Using this just turns on the metronome and turns it off. Really that easy, guys. If you want to change the sound of the metronome or the kind of tone or volume, if you right click and go to settings, you can do all that here. With the tone, it'll sound different each time, so let's listen like this. This is the master volume for the project. We never touch that really. And the only thing on this right hand side I want you to worry about is this button here, the notepad button. So if you click on that, it gives you option to write notes inside your project, just like this. I really only ever use it for lyrics, but it's a really good little tool to have that you can just add notes and they will stick to your project, so you don't have to make them elsewhere and remember where they are. So that's a lovely tool. So this here is our instrument, and you can see it's one track. So we've just got this one unit here that we're looking at. This is our piano sound. We've got a mute button, which will stop any noise coming out. A solo button, which means when we've got loads of tracks, only this one's going to play. And then record. If the record button's not red, it means that when we do go to record, this isn't going to play anything. Look, I'm hitting the keyboard here, and we're not getting any sound. If you click the red button, then suddenly we get sound again. So make sure if you're recording the piano or whatever track you want, it's primed. That's what we say, it's primed. It's got the red button clicked. So if we want to make another track, how do we do that? Cool, so you can go Command, Option, and N, and that'll bring up this menu that we started with. Let's open an audio track this time. Or you can go Track, New Tracks, and just do exactly the same thing. And see, now we have these 3 tracks we're looking at. Let's rename this one to Vocals, just as a test, and we can delete the second track. So as you see on the audio tracks, we also have this I button. Now the I button is used so when you're recording, you can hear what you're playing, be it a guitar, you can hear it back through the speakers. So you want to leave that turned on when you're recording. You've obviously got the volume of the track to the right hand side. And a really quick tip that I wish I'd known sooner, if you hold Option on your keyboard and click any option in Logic, it resets it to 0. So we're on -14 here. If you click with Option, it will reset it to 0. Same with the pan. This is to pan your sounds left or right. If it's somewhere you don't want it, you want to get back to 0, hold Option and click straight back to 0. Or you can double click and even type numbers in like this, and it'll go to the number you said, so 50 or -50 in this case. Remember I mentioned that cycle bar earlier? That's this grayed out section here, the cycle range. So if you click your loop button, the cycle button, it goes yellow. And all that means is this playhead is only going to come to the end of this and loop back to the start again. So it's great for looping sections if ever you want to do that. What you need to know is if you want to extend it, you go to the end and you get this square bracket, look, and then you can drag this section out. If you want to move the cycle selection, just click anywhere in the yellow and you can move it around just like that. Whenever you hit play with cycle selected, it will jump to the start of the cycle. Bear that in mind. It's not going to start, if your playhead's over here and you click play, it's not going to start from bar 3, it's going to start from bar 7. To turn this on and off, you can either click at the top, or I usually hit C for cycle. So now we're going to look at a really important part of the screen. That's in the bottom left. It's kind of this control panel looking thing you can see down here. This is where we affect our sounds. It's where we put the instrument and then the effects that we apply to that instrument. So as you can see, we've got this funny looking word, the EXS24. We've got a channel EQ, compressor, a tape delay, and then 2 buses. Don't worry too much about what all these things are yet, just look at where they are on the screen. So this slot here right at the top is where your instrument goes. If you hover over it and click the little 2 arrows on the right hand side, then you'll access the instrument menu and you can access all the instruments in Logic. The other way to do that is obviously going back to our old menu, and if you switch the instrument here, it will switch it here as well. So now we've got a church organ sound. Lovely. So this is just for your instrument. I've just gone back there, Command and Z, back to our piano patch because I wanted to show you these bits. These slots underneath the instrument are where we put effects to affect the sound of the instrument. We're going to get into what all of these are. To add one, you just click in the space and then you get all your plugins there. Again, yours might look slightly differently because you probably won't have these Fab Filter plugins here. Don't worry too much about that. We're just going to look at the default Logic things. So to change an effect, you click on the arrows. To turn an effect on and off, you click on the on and off button, and to open the effect, you click on the lines in the middle. So that's a 3-part button there. You've got on and off, open the effect, and change the effect. And you can have as many effects as you like in a row, but we're going to look at that again later in the course. This is just so you know your way around. Below that section, we've got buses. We're going to get into that a little bit later. It's more of an intermediate technique using buses to add effects, so don't worry about that yet. Just know that they're there. Stereo out is where you're sending the sound to, so you're sending it to the main output for Logic. Below we've got read. Again, this is getting into more advanced stuff. Don't worry about that. We've got another pan control, which as you can see here, corresponds to this one up here. So if I change this all the way to minus 60, 64, down here, it's showing minus 64. And you can do the same, double click and type 0 to get back to 0, or option click to go back to 0. You also have a fader here, which is just the volume of that track. Same as you've seen, I'm sure, on many mixing desks. Option click back to 0, that affects this slider up here. They're just the same. So this is just another way of looking at this fader down here. This is your main output channel, so anything you play is going to come out of here. This shouldn't really change. And to be honest, that's pretty much it. I know I've really whizzed through that. I just wanted to give you an idea, so when I say, okay, we're going to turn the cycle on, you know that that's what that means. Cool, so hopefully now you know your way around Logic, right? You know where to find all the main controls and you know how to get around the screen a little bit better than you did before. Don't worry, I'm always going to cover stuff again when we go through the course, so you're not going to be left looking for buttons and stuff. I'm going to try and make it as easy to follow as possible. Next time we're going to be checking out chords and synthesis, so how we use chords to build up the skeleton of a track that we can then write over. It's going to be really good fun and I'm hoping to see you there. Cheers.